What is the saddest job you've seen an elderly person doing? Taco Bell. Her name is Flo, she's in her mid-80s, and she's the sweetest lady I've ever met. My buddy and I got to know her a little. It turns out that she was swindled out of her retirement savings and now has to work. Reading this thread was a terrible idea. I can't handle all this sadness right now. The elderly deli clerk at the Walmart near me. He used a walker, and customers would try not to get him because he was so slow. I liked the way he cut the meat, and he always got the order correct, so I didn't mind waiting 20 minutes for my deli stuff. He's not there anymore. My old, public, middle school had and still has a planetarium. Growing up, our planetarium had a wonderful teacher who inspired all of us with amazing stories and riveting lectures about our solar system, our galaxy, and the universe. Even before attending that middle school, we'd take a field trip once a year from our elementary school, so we knew this guy from age 5 or 6. Awesome guy. Well then, with no child left behind, he got fired because he wasn't certified in science, even though he knew more about science than most science teachers. He got a job at a camp serving food. My wife teaches and her class takes a field trip to that camp once a year, and she says it's such a travesty to see him cleaning up food. What a waste of talent. That is one of the saddest ones I've read here. Approximately 65 years old man with an oxygen tank and breather tube under his nose, working as a Walmart greeter. I saw him frequently at the local Walmart, and one day I realized I had not seen him for a while. I asked another employee what happened to him, and they said he died of a massive stroke while working. I remarked on his amazing desire to keep working at his age and with his health problems, and was told the elderly man hated working at Walmart but needed the money to care for his grandchildren after their mother ran off. Where I used to live, I'd occasionally see a 60-something woman standing outside a pizza shop, dressed as a pizza slice. She always looked like she was debating handing out flyers for another day, or walking in front of a bus. Oh god, my heart. I went to McDonald's around 3 AM once, and I saw an old woman who looked around 65-70 years old making my hamburger. She looked incredibly tired and lonely. Not quite a job, but still one of the most depressing things I encountered in my life. In Germany, the return fee on recyclable bottles is around 8 cents for glass bottles. Plastic bottles and cans net you 25 cents. Yet most people ignore this fact and throw them away anyway. Especially in public gatherings events, it became a pretty common picture of homeless old poor people browsing trash bins and collecting the bottles to up their income. They are nicknamed Fandopa. I personally encountered a situation in line to a metal concert where a 70-something old man asked for the emptied beer bottles that most of the ticket holders needed to get rid of anyway. He already had amassed a pretty large plastic bag full of them when some buttholes decided it would be funny to tell him and another guy collecting bottles to fight for it. The Gramps grabbed the bottle and tried to scram away as fast as possible, but the other guy, clearly homeless and intoxicated as heck, grabs him and basically chokeholds him. But the senior holds onto that bottle net worth of 8 cents tight as if his life depended on it, and those drunk jerks around laugh their butt off. Made me feel sick as heck. This is not something specific to Germany. It is rampant in NYC, and I have seen it in many other big cities. People will do what they can to get by. Come to Asia, Hong Kong, China, Korea, Japan, and you'll see depressing scenes of old people working all the time. I've seen so much sadness. Old people in construction, barely strong enough to shovel properly, handing out flyers to people that don't want them, so getting ignored and bustled here and there, owning a little cart-pulled street food store, working at a convenience store, graveyard shift, street sweeper, frail and weak looking, building cleaner, cleaning elevators of 15 different buildings. Met him at 4 AM when I was going for a stroll. I was going to post something similar. In Seoul you often see tiny 80-plus-year-old women sitting on the dirty subway floors selling a basket of their homegrown vegetables all day for less than $1. Made me so sad. For me, it wasn't something I saw, it was something that was said. Towards the end of his life, my grandpa was becoming increasingly demented with shorter and shorter intervals of lucidity. We were forced to put him into a care home, and one day after I had driven him around to lunch and errands to cheer him up, he looked me in the eye and said, "Don't take me back there. There are dead people in there. At first I just assumed he meant ghosts or that someone had dies. So I told him, Grandpa, there aren't dead people in there. And he replied, yes there are. Those people walk around and talk and eat. But they aren't really alive because they don't know who they are anymore. My dad is 72. Both of his parents had Alzheimer's when they passed. He has told me repeatedly that when the time comes to put him in a home, to tell him first and leave him alone with a loaded pistol for 5 minutes. Don't know if I can. Don't know if I can bear not to. I once saw an elderly woman working the bathroom, selling lotion, mouthwash, etc. at a pretty wild nightclub. Not only did I feel bad for her, but she made me feel much shame for being in such a place. It's like asking grandma for condoms. I work at UPS and there's this 57-year-old Indian guy who unloads trailers. I'm talking about 53-foot trailers too. Full of 40-70 pound boxes. With the crappy ass supervisor who used to be in the Marines. So he cusses him out every day. He has a back brace on and everything. I don't know how he does it, but every day I see him limping in pain. Just trying to make it to the next day. The saddest part is that he has another job in the morning, but they don't offer benefits. So he only works at UPS just so his kids can have health insurance. In college, I lived in a house and we had a really shady landlord. Like, he never fixed crap or responded to emails on time. And when we tried to renew our lease, he tried to strong-arm us into agreeing to increased rent and construction on the house for half the year. Bulls, bruh. But the kicker was that he wasn't even the real property manager. His parents, this guy is like mid-30s, owned the properties he manages and he got to pretend to be Mr. Manager. The worst part about this sucker, he did almost none of any of the work, not even managerial or clerical, and he let his elderly mother come by the house weekly to do the manual labor. I'm talking sweeping, raking a metric frick ton of leaves, bending over and bagging those leaves, hauling those into her truck, trimming bushes, mowing the lawn, washing windows, etc. While her even older husband sat in the car unable to help. Every week. For the whole year. I saw that guy's 70-plus-year-old parents probably 4x as much as I ever saw him. And it got to a point where I would do as much of the work as I could every Sunday night so she would have less to do. And I'd have lemonade and iced tea on hand for every Monday. She was this awesome, sweet old granny type lady. But the son was a freaking TLDR. Butthole. The landlord lets his mom do all the heavy work, does none of the easy work himself. Mr. Manager. Don't call it that. 75 years old woman cleaning the bank every night after hours. Her husband was a very successful farmer that died suddenly and her kids screwed her out of the farm and her own house. Absolutely breaks my heart to see her. Whenever I hear about some used to be famous and headlining wrestlers still wrestling even though they are clearly broken out of shape, I get a little sad. Ric Flair comes to mind. Guy has made millions and is over 60 and not worth crap. I was walking back home from the uni library at about 1:30 am. Coursework. And I saw an old man, must have been about 80, rooting through the rubbish out the back of a supermarket looking for something to eat. I have no idea how that could happen. In Oxford of all places, which sadly has a massive homeless population who are all delightful people. I gave him a $5 as it was all I had on me and he needed it. He looked like he was going to cry and said thank you and bless you about 20 times. It really made me sad deep down when I saw him. He was probably a fricking World War II veteran for frick's sake. Not a job per se, but it was his job at that time. Some of you might not realize that elderly people often choose to take these jobs even though they are fine financially. I worked in retail and one season we had 2 new employees in their late 60s and I thought what most of you are thinking and found it depressing. Until I actually talked to them. One of them was a retired high school superintendent and the other retired from the Air Force. They both wanted to work there to do an easy job, to feel productive and to stay in touch with their community. One of them made a clock for the break room and the other had a fine collection of dirty jokes. Both were stand-up men and dapper as frick. Edit. The word superintendent has never been written or seen by me before. My high school sophomore English teacher retired after I took her class. She then proceeded to take every substitution position and odd job the school offered her because she was so bored with her retirement by the time school started again. I once had a guy who had to be about 65 deliver my pizza. I was hoping he just wanted a job to keep himself busy during the day, but I tipped him $20 on a $15 bill anyway. Twist, this happens to him on more than half his deliveries. His other car is a Porsche. There is a tiny little old man that gets dropped off every morning at the local McDonald's. Always gets out after giving his little old lady wife a smooch and slowly ambles his way inside, to turn into a greater grumpy old bastard. They ain't all sweet. I'd be grumpy too if I were that age and had to work at McDonald's. In my university, an old man serves the young students food every day. It's sad to think that this old man is watching all these people hopeful for a mysterious and long life, as he uses the rest of his short time giving them food. At my university there's a really old man who works in the cafeteria as well, but he seems like a father to all the women who work there and he is always in good company and seems to enjoy his job. I used to work at a hospital. There were people who pushed the big trash cans down the halls all day long gathering trash from housekeeping. It wasn't housekeeping, it was a giant dumpster on wheels. They would then take it to the compactor and dump it there. There was this really nice old man who walked funny and was always sweating profusely. He worked very hard. You could tell he was in some kind of pain. He was always cheerful and had nice things to say. Always. I would have lunch with him all the time and found out he used to have his own photography business, but cannot understand all the digital stuff that is new, and no one wants it the old way. He also revealed to me his hips are uneven and one leg is significantly shorter than the other, hence his painful looking walk. He needed a total knee replacement in both knees. His wife was in corporate, having given up photography also, and now answers phones and such. He told me to go to the local museum and look at some of their work. There were tons of beautiful pictures of nature and local history. It makes me sad he has to do that now. We are a society that wants our pictures perfect and now, and he didn't want to destroy the beauty and art that was photography. He found himself out of the business because he didn't see the new way coming. OP, just a suggestion. Next time you see her, ask her if she's read anything interesting lately and have a little conversation about books. I bet it would really brighten her day. I'm a manager for a Domino's Pizza. One of our drivers is 75 years old and he's still driving. We're pushing $15,000 a week and wanting to make $20,000 a week. If we get busy, he can't handle it. He's slowing down and I see this every single morning I open with him. Plus he's constantly coughing and has lung problems and he won't be able to see the doctor for another 3 weeks to figure out the problem. I do as much as I possibly can in those mornings to make sure he doesn't have to. I don't think he's going to make it this winter. I once saw a 70-something man working the concessions at the movie theater. He was taking direction from his 17-year-old co-worker and it made devastatingly sad. My friend who was with me tried to convince me he was probably doing it because he was retired and bored, but he looked so depressed. Walmart receipt checker greeter. What's old man Jenkins gonna do if I am running out the door with stolen merchandise? One hip check put the old man in the hospital. I hear ya. Flat screen TV got stolen at the Walmart in my town. The guys just kind of shuffled past the door greeter. Then the greeter calmly walked to customer service to let them know. At the warehouse that I worked in, I would load trucks from 2 PM to 2 AM. It was no problem for me. I was young and in great shape. One day all my co-workers decided to ditch work and go out and party in the city, which left me to run a department with 4 people minimum. So the supervisor decides to bring in 3 employees. Among one of them was a man in his mid-60s. My supervisor was yelling at him and pushing him to hurry and load faster. Out of rage I told him, "Sir, with all due respect, please step back into your office. I will pick up the slack of others as long as you stop disrespecting this man." He leaves mad, but I did just that. Poor guy couldn't even last 5 hours before I sent him back to an easier department. I was a telemarketer for a few weeks. Before you get on my tea about it, it was telemarketing or being homeless and I chose to keep a roof over my head. The vast majority of people working there were in their 60s and had been working in sales their whole lives, and they would believe any sales pitch ever. They were the people who, instead of becoming jaded and getting real jobs, had just stayed in sales. They work because they needed the money, not because they wanted to, and they were all involved in these multi-level marketing scams they would try to sell to everyone in the office. They were nice, but so depressing. Oh, and the product was websites, and none of them could operate a computer. You can definitely still bathe with a colostomy bag. She was just gross. I worked in food factories the last 2 summers. Both had some elderly people working there, but one lady in particular made me really sad. She had been working at this factory since 1967. She was probably in her mid-70s. Now, I'm 21 and in pretty good shape, and 10-hour days at this place left me with aches and pains. I can't imagine how hard it was for her to do this job. She would run scurry to the break room so she could have more time off her feet. I felt so bad for her. My mom would be pretty angered at some of you calling 60-year-olds or even people in their late 50s old or elderly. People sometimes get cranky in their old age. While a lot of people will say Walmart greeter, those people might actually like doing that. Getting to say hi to hundreds of people might bring some joy into their lives. The worst job I've seen an elderly person do was washing dishes at a restaurant. He was over 85 and he had lung problems, and the amount of chemicals that we used at that restaurant made him wheeze, and he would sometimes have these terrible coughing fits where he sounded like he was losing a lung. We all encouraged him to go to the hospital. He was hospitalized several times during my employment there, and he would never go on his own volition. Short girl at a bar on Bourbon Street, standing right outside the door of a place with a tray full of test tube shots and making guys drink them from her cleavage. Wait, this is for the jobs of the elderly. Oh god. I felt so bad for the older employees when I was at my summer job. It was at a pizza stand in a children's amusement park. It seemed like it would be demeaning to be working the same job as all those kids' first job. Most of them couldn't keep up. One lady couldn't really do any tasks that were time constrained, so she just cleaned all day at her own pace and didn't provide much meaningful help making, serving the food or running the register. I think the most depressing part would be seeing the kids you work with rotate out and go to college and get better jobs. I'm working with people 3x my age over the summer, then in the fall I'm at a job with twice the rate and twice the hours. It seems like a barely sustainable life, and seems so demeaning to be surpassed by people young enough to be your grandchildren. I was eating at Arby's and an elderly man came up to my table and said, "So are you done with that? May I take your tray?" In that instant I imagined all the things he has done, seen, experienced in his years, and now he cleans up after 20-something kids in Arby's. I refused his offer and said, "It's you I should be calling, sir. Don't worry, I'll handle it. Enjoy the rest of your day, sir." I picked up my tray, wiped off the table, walked to the door, rang the good service bell, pointed at him and gave him a thumbs up as I left. The one time I ate at Chick-fil-A, they had an elderly woman whose job was to get refills and bus tables. All crap you're supposed to do yourself at a fast food restaurant. It was really weird. A Waffle House I ate at in Georgia had a tall, stooped elderly man who opened the door for customers walking in. I felt bad for him. Every Waffle House in the country is staffed almost exclusively by sad old people. I saw a woman who was clearly in her late 50s, early 60s at a post in Iraq. My group would have stopped, but we were in a caravan. We all noticed and made comments. I'm talking white hair, glasses, frail, and could barely carry the weapon she had in her hands. All the old people in Korea wander the city streets in search of cardboard. Then they build giant mounds until it's time to haul it into the recycling center. When I was in high school, my grade had a massive full-scale food fight. As part of our punishment, the dean made us sit and watch as all the old people from the kitchen cleaned up our entire mess. It actually worked. Many tears were shed. I was in the electronics depot at Walmart waiting to check out. The cashier was an elderly woman looking around frantically. After hearing her call her supervisor to get back up at least 5 times in the 10 or so minutes I stood there, it was apparent she really had to go to the bathroom. She never got relieved and ended up abandoning her post to go to the bathroom. While she was gone, someone finally showed up and then called the manager to talk crap about her not being there. When she got back, the manager came by to ream her out for leaving. I could see the embarrassment in her eyes as she had to explain that she was on meds that made her slightly incontinent. In front of customers, Manager didn't care. Frick Walmart. There's a hardware store in my area that has a guy who must be about 90 years old working there. He's cheerful, spry, and knows just about everything you want to know about the things in that massive store. I love that guy. I'm 99% sure he's the guy who owns the place and has done so for the last 400 years. The reason this is the saddest job is because he's one of only 2 nice employees in the whole store. No one else there has skills or knowledge even close to this man. And as competent as they might be, they still look like the dim cousin compared to this guy. That makes me very sad for him. Loving your job, loving your store, having to work with morons all day long who pee the customers off and don't care about doing a good job. That must really suck. There's a 70-80-year-old woman who works at my local Taco Bell. Every time I go in and see her there, I feel bad for her. She's been there for years and I always feel bad she has to work instead of being able to enjoy retirement. Maybe she works there just for the human interaction though, which also just makes me feel sad. She works the register though, so it's not like she has to run around making the food. In the case of women, a lot of older women don't work long enough to qualify for full social security benefits because of raising children, etc. Couple that with the fact that a lot of women have higher life expectancy than their spouses and you get a large number of people who just can't afford to retire. Cutting fabric at the fabric wholesaler, wearing a brace on both forearms because they developed carpal tunnel long ago. There's an old guy, probably 75, who works at Burger King. Every time I see that guy, I remind myself to save more money. My brother and I had a neighbor that was nice enough and we liked him. However, we called him the mood vampire. He was just so sad. He was dying and his lung capacity made it take several minutes to just get out the door. His conversations took minutes because he needed to breath several times between words. Because it took so much effort, we engaged in conversation and listened to him. But it was always horrible. I just got back from my mother's funeral. I went to visit my girlfriend. I haven't been to her grave since she died. He had been on disability, but that had run out. At the point we moved out, he was almost out of money and by law his job at Best Buy had to take him back. There was no way he could do that job and he knew it. Back a few years ago during lunch break, a few of us used to go down to the shops to get lunch. The lady who was always behind the till was in her late 70s and was so sweet, polite, and always asked us how we were. We would sometimes be lazy and buy pot noodles or microwavable burgers as you could cook them in the shop. It was really quite enjoyable talking to her whilst waiting for our meals to cook, and she enjoyed talking to us. We knew each other pretty well because we had been regulars for 3-4 years. We were making our way down to the shop one day just like any other day when we saw a car parked up next to the entrance. We walked in to find a guy with a knife shouting, threatening and demanding she hand over the money. She was shaking and crying and didn't want to hand over the money, pleading with the guy, but he was getting more and more angry, so I carefully and calmly raised my voice to say she'd give the till money to him, just don't harm her. She opened the till and let the guy have the money. He ran out the shop and jumped in his car and drove off. But little did he know during all of this we had managed to sneakily take a picture of his face, his car and his number plate. Our phones are wonderful things. We stayed with the lady until the police arrived and got her to calm down, made her a cup of tea and gave her some company. A few hours later the guy was arrested, charged and jailed. The next day she was back in work and told us that it had scared her so much that it would be her last 2 days. She told us that dinner free and that she was very thankful for stepping in and helping, and as a thank you she said that we should share the money what was stolen between us, but obviously we all declined and told her to treat herself with the money. On her last day we surprised her with some flowers, a card, some chocolates and a few other little things. If we could have captured her smile it would have been so amazing. It was truly priceless. She was so happy, kept thanking us over and over, and was a bit teary. Her daughter and her husband now own the shop and they've installed a bunch of security measures as well as having a policy of only having max of £100 in the till. All 3 of us have permanent 25% discount, and the best thing is the lady wanted to go live with her sister in Australia, and well, last year she finally got to move out there, so we're all so happy for her. I lived in South Korea for a year. Koreans are terrible about littering. They commonly just throw empty cans and bottles on the ground. Every weekend night the nightlife areas are absolutely trashed. Every morning an army of elderly Koreans rolls in and picks up all the soju bottles and such. Not sure if they are paid to do it or if they get a deposit on the bottles or something. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.